And I'm sitting there on my couch alone one evening, and I can't really describe it any other way but this. I started getting a very eerie feeling. And my mother passed away about 5 years ago, maybe six now. For the first time since she passed away, kind of was just feeling her there. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I just have to say it like it is. And then I start to have this feeling like the word Kabbalah. I've been reading about Kabbalism for 2 months. I start to it's very difficult to describe, but I start to ruminate over the word Kabbalah, and it's all of a sudden sounding familiar to me. And I'm thinking to myself, Kabbalah, Kabbalah, why is this sounding so familiar? And all of a sudden it hits me.
Welcome to a very special episode of the Her First podcast. This is our first listener story that we're going to share with you from one of our listeners who has a very special story that came from one of our podcast episodes. If you're listening to this episode and you have a story that you want to share, please reach out to us because we'd love to hear from you and see if it's a story we could share with all of our listeners. So I want to start by introducing Jackie. Jackie is a longtime listener, original listener. I think she's listened to every single episode. She's also a dear friend, an ex-colleague of mine. We used to work together in my last corporate job and really just connected and have stayed connected since. And I'm so excited to have her here to share this story. Welcome, Jackie. Could you just take a minute to introduce yourself?
I sure will. I mean, first of all, I have to piggyback on everything you said, which is I am a huge fan of your show. I have listened to every single episode, I think. And Michelle, even though I don't know you personally, I feel like I do because of listening so often. And it's just really exciting to be here. So I don't have a lot to say about me personally, other than, yes, I've worked with Joanna professionally and we have remained good friends, which has been awesome. I've been in the corporate world for, 35 plus years. We won't add them all up. I have dabbled in entrepreneurship on and off throughout my years and probably will again in the future at some point.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being a listener. Thank you so much for being my friend. And I'm excited to really dig in today. So all of this started, and what's really fun about this story, as a side note for everyone listening, I experienced Jackie's story as it happened. So each phase came to me in bits. Now, Michelle is on the show. She knows nothing. She has no idea what she's getting herself into for today. So we're going to get her real raw reactions from what's going on. But all of this started, Jackie, back when you listened to a very particular episode of ours, which really sparked this journey. Can you tell us about that episode, what it was about, and kind of how it led you down really a path of self-discovery?
I would love to. So it was, I believe, a show you had last November. So that just gives you an idea of the timeline. It hasn't even been 1 year. I've always been a very spiritually minded person since I was a young girl and felt that I have some kind of spiritual purpose that I'm supposed to fulfill. Like I said, I'm in the corporate world and I've been married and raised kids and all that, but I've always felt there's something really important in that realm that I'm supposed to fulfill. Even though, I felt that way, I've never ever felt motivated or driven to, do any special practice like astrology or tarot card readings or any kind of practice that some people in that world do. So there I was listening to your show and you were doing an interview of a coach, Heather, who does human design. I was listening to that episode and she was just talking all about human design. In fact, she did a reading for you and Michelle. And all of a sudden, it just lit this fire under me. I was like, oh my God, this is my purpose. This is what I am supposed to do. Like, this is it. And it just went from there.
Awesome. So you listened to that episode. It really stuck with you and you took a dive into learning about human design for yourself. Tell us about what that was like. I know you started reading your chart, people's charts, learning really deeply about it.
Definitely. So I am that kind of person. When I get into a subject, I go all in. And that's always been my tendency. I reached out to Heather on Instagram. I started talking to her about, how you become a coach. I got the book. I started doing readings for all of my friends. And I actually went a level deeper. I wanted to understand what it was based on. And one of the things it's based on is Kabbalism. It's also based on the I Ching, which is like a Chinese version, I call it, of the tarot card, and also astrology. And I knew about the I Ching and astrology, but I didn't know anything about Kabbalism. I knew it was Jewish mysticism, but I had never read about it. I go all in, I read. Probably spent between that November episode and January, probably 2 full books on Kabbalism just to understand it, because that's the kind of person I am. That kind of started off that whole part of the journey.
I love this part of the story because I think sometimes for Michelle and I, we can forget how impactful some of these topics we talk about are. You listen to an episode, learn about a topic, and then really dug in and started using it to improve your life, understand people more, and do all of that, which is a lot of what we are about here. That's so awesome. Now, I know your journey also took a very personal turn. And so it started with this in depth, I want to know about human design. I want to get deeper on this. I want to understand the spirituality behind it and all of that, but took a personal side. Can you tell us about that?
Where it gets pretty crazy. So November, December, January, it's early January of this year. And I'm sitting there on my couch alone one evening, and I can't really describe it any other way but this. I started getting a very eerie feeling. And my mother passed away about 5 years ago, maybe 6 now. For the first time since she passed away, kind of was just feeling her there. And I know that sounds kind of weird, but I just have to say it like it is. And then I start to have this feeling like the word Kabbalah. I've been reading about Kabbalism for 2 months. I start to it's very difficult to describe, but I start to ruminate over the word Kabbalah, and it's all of a sudden sounding familiar to me. And I'm thinking to myself, Kabbalah, Kabbalah, why is this sounding so familiar? And all of a sudden it hits me. I'm like, oh my gosh, it rhymes with the middle name that I was given at birth. And I dropped that middle name when I was like 20 years old because I never liked it at all. But my middle name at birth it doesn't enunciate the same, but when you see it spelled out, it is the same. It's Shalaba. And when I wrote it out on a piece of paper, I wrote it out, Shalaba, the spelling of my name, and Kabbalah. And they were literally the same number of letters. And the last 2 syllables were reversed of each other. And I was like, here. Because nope, there was some made up weird story about my whole middle name and why my mom would have given me the weird middle name. So I was like, so bizarre. And then I all of a sudden remember, oh my gosh, I was told 8 years ago. And it's like one of those things that I was told, and it was as practically quick as it was in my mind, it was out of my mind. I was told that my mom had an affair around the time I was born, and that the man she had an affair with was Jewish. And so all of a sudden, I'm like, holy crap, I need to take a DNA test because something's really weird about this.
So you took a DNA test, and what did you find out?
So my mother is 100% French and my father 100% Irish. And it makes more sense when you understand I was a second generation baby. My siblings are 20 years older than I am. My parents are long gone. When I tell you my mom was 100% French and my father was 100% Irish, they really were, because they were like, my mom moved here as a first generation person. She moved here from France. My father was first generation, born in the United States from his parents that immigrated from Ireland. So DNA test should have definitely come back 50-50 Irish, French. But instead, it came back 50-50 French, Jewish. I find out that my father was my biological father.
Plot twist. So exciting. So this is taking a turn. We introduced human design to you. You started exploring it, and then you started studying, and it sounds like it opened up another channel for you. It opened up a level of intuition and attunement that maybe hadn't been there before, and then bringing in and allowing these experiences to impact you and how you respond to that and then taking action. So, just to pull out for our listeners, a lot of what we talk about are small pieces of ways to have more self-awareness, to figure out like what's underlying. We talk a lot about belief systems. We talk a lot about practical and tactical tools, but everything that underlies that is the way in which we lead our lives and the assumptions that we have and the belief systems that we have and the way in which we navigate those experiences. So, you're hearing a high level version of what Jackie experienced as a result of starting to bring in more self-awareness, starting to understand better. And human design is a tool that we use in order to better understand ourselves so that we take action and we operate in our businesses and in our lives differently. You found out something huge. So there was no information, no awareness of this beforehand, that your father is not your father, your biological father.
No. And when I was told about the affair 8 years ago, I actually confronted my mother about it. And she was like, yeah, I had an affair, but I'm going to tell you right now, there's no chance in the world that your father's not your father. So she took that secret with her to the grave, unless she really believed it. I don't know. So I really do want to touch on what you just said, though, Michelle, because I do think that the way we live intuitively is just as important as any other resource that we have to negotiate through our lives, whether it be, we've got our brains, we've got our, certain skills and gifts that we've been given. And I think the way we sense things from within ourselves is a huge part of it. And I have always been a very intuitive person. I definitely that evening started to have this big feeling that was happening. It was a big feeling, and it was like something dropped in on me. And then I took that test. After I took the test, it took like 6 or 8 weeks to get the results. I pretty much put it out of my head. And I really, at the time when I put it out of my head, I really was thinking to myself, maybe this guy that she had an affair with was, he was a Kabbalist, and maybe it just spurred some spiritual thinking on her part. And she wanted to put a spiritual stamp on me. I really didn't think I was half Jewish. Not good or bad. I just didn't think it or feel it. So I find out it's a Friday night. I open my personal emails because, I've kind of almost forgotten about the test. It's taking so long to get the results back. I got the email and I open it up, and there it is, 50% Jewish, 50% French. And first thing I do is go straight to my paternal matches. And I look up there at the very top, and there's a 5% second cousin match with my cousin Ivy, my second cousin, Ivy. I reached out to my top 5 paternal matches. She's the only one that ever to this day has responded. My biological father's name is Saul Kramer. And I had said in my note, my name is Jackie Stone. I live in San Diego. I just found this out. And the man my mother had an affair with was Saul Kramer. You know anything about this and can help me put the pieces together, I'd love to hear more. And she writes back and she's like, wow, Jackie, really big deal. I hope you're doing okay. And yeah, it actually turns out that my mother's maiden name is Kramer, and she had a cousin Saul. And so it just went from there, and information that I was able to obtain between her and my Aunt Harriet. I actually visited them in person in Florida. That's where they live. And it was just this amazing reunion. And Ivy and my cousin Andy was another connection. And he agreed to take a DNA test too, because I was like, I just got to firm this up again. And he came back as my first cousin. And so it was like, wow. And along the way, and I knew that he was a college professor. And so I'm reaching out, I'm trying to find all this information, I'm gathering it all, and I'm having this incredible, I can't even describe it, burning sensation like, this is otherworldly. The universe needed me, wanted me to know this. And I'm like, what am I supposed to know? Why was I supposed to know it? It wasn't just meeting these family members. And I knew there was something bigger. And along the way, I was told that he had a daughter, but nobody was alive that either knew who she knew, had any touch with her, or knew her last name or anything. So I'd kind of given up on them. And this burning, burning feeling is just becoming overwhelming. And I keep searching and it's crazy. And then one night I get an email from cousin Andy and he says, guess what? I uncovered some boxes and I found some paperwork and I found your sister's last name and I Googled her and here it is. Give it a shot. And so I did. I looked up her name and I live in San Diego and I went into LinkedIn and popped her name. To my surprise, all these family members, they're all on the East Coast. She was living in San Diego. And I'm like, oh, no, wait. AI just knew I was in San Diego, so just sent me the person that was in San Diego. But then I read about her, and she has just moved from Georgia after retiring in January, right when I decided to take the DNA test.
I just got chills.
And what's amazing is we have that sister here with us today. And I'd love it, actually, Jackie, would you like to introduce your newfound family member?
I'm going to get emotional. So, this is my sister, Paula.
Paula, you can unmute yourself and say hi.
I was only muted for 66 years. And now I'm unmuted. Yeah, it was pretty amazing to get an email from someone saying all this stuff about my family members that ones I barely knew anything about, but all of it was very precise. It was correct. It wasn't like someone trying to scam me that, didn't know and was, grasping at straws to try to figure out things to make me, believe that this was for real. And when we had our first phone conversation, I already had this gut feeling or whatever you want to, however you want to phrase it, that this was going to be something really interesting. In fact, it flashed through my mind that this woman trying to contact me could be a sister. So that when she said that was the connection, and I was like, wow, okay, somehow this feels right. This feels correct. A lot of what Jackie said about her spirituality, and we have a lot of that in common. And I mean, we could do a whole nother episode on me. I know this one is not about me really, but I have lots I could tell you about me and my life and how it's gone and all of that. I mean, here I am, a retired professor, kind of adjunct, semi-retired, hate to say that I'm retired. I've always been a yoga teacher. I just went to India in March. There's always been that same vein of spirituality ever since I was a little girl. So Jackie had written some memoirs that I got to read recently. And in reading them, it was like, oh my goodness, this is just too uncanny because there's so many gut level similarities. The other part of this for me is that I always adored my father, Saul Kramer. I didn't get to be brought up by him, but I had a relationship. I knew him and we saw each other throughout my growing up years, the most fantastic person on earth. I absolutely adored him. I admired everything about him. So the idea that someone else would have the same interest and enthusiasm, there was no feeling of jealousy. I think I told Jackie this. If this had happened when I was a teenager, I don't know what my reaction would have been. But as a grown woman, it was, wow, I have this sister who cares and is interested in my father and will come to know that he is as special as I know him to be. And to me, it was like a gift from the universe. It was amazing. And then meeting Jackie and just our phone conversations. And then when we met, just an automatic feeling of trust and affinity. I just feel like, in a way, we've known each other all our lives, even though we just met.
What an amazing thing to be able to discover and take part in. So what has it really, developed for you two now that you've been connected? What has that created for both of you? Or let's start, Jackie, what has that created for you through this process?
the very first time we talked on the phone, it was 3 hours. And then the very first time we met in person, which was actually several weeks later because she was on a East Coast trip, was 8 hours. We are just both so taken. And, we have siblings. She has a sister who lives in LA. I have a sister who lives in LA. I have a brother, and I mean, we love our siblings very, very much. And yet, there's also been a sense of our siblings haven't been able to relate to everything that we are because we are those very, spiritually inclined people, and we have that in common. And so it feels like something that was really supposed to be connected. And the fact that Paula has told me she always planned to retire and move to California. That was always her wish. And then the fact that she's in San Diego and that she moved here when I had that I mean, it was just in the moment I saw her on LinkedIn, that whole burning feeling sensation I was telling you about was gone. Zero, it was gone. And so I knew as soon as I found this was the purpose. And we're having a great time spending time together, and it's really fun.
And one thing I love about this story is that you got this feeling. You learned about a concept and you got a feeling, and you said yes along the way to all of these new experience and new things. You had a feeling, you're like, let me discover this. Let me take a step farther and a step farther. And you kind of just kept going on this direction that led you on this path to having a brand new connection and a brand new family member to be part of your life. And one thing I know about this story that I think is really cool that we haven't talked about quite yet is your father also had a very deep spiritual connection. So we really come back full circle for you for this discovery. And Jackie, do you want to just tell us a little bit about Saul Kramer and what he did for a living?
Well, he was a professor at the University of Florida. I mean, Paula could tell you more, but he had like 3 PhDs and he was super smart. When I looked up retired faculty, Saul Kramer, University of Florida, what came up was this thing called the Saul Kramer Paper Collection. And the very top article that was written said biological aspects of mystical transcendence. It was something like that. I'm like, oh, that's my father. Like that connects. And what's funny too, we didn't mention this, but you were wanting to do this recording way back. Like I think it was like March, April. And I said, I definitely want to do this, but I gotta tell you, I feel like more is coming. And I hadn't discovered Paula yet. I hadn't, that was May. So, but I said right then and there, like, there's something more coming. And I think we need to wait. And because it was such a strong conviction. And yeah, the fact that he was that kind of person, she is, we're both here in San Diego, pretty crazy.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us and all of our listeners. I'm glad we have this recorded because if all else, you two have your story in a place that you can hear and listen to all of the time. One thing that I have been thinking about with your story is obviously this is a big change for you. Your identity, your ancestry, your DNA, your family line, all of those things really affect the way we live and we do things. Has this discovery affected for you, Jackie, how you think about your life, how you think about your work priorities, how you show up every day? Like, how has this discovery affected your life going forward?
You're so right about that. And one of the things that was very pivotal to me throughout the discovery, this whole discovery kind of phase was when I met Ivy and Harriet. Harriet said, "You sound exactly like your Aunt Vicky." That was Saul's sister. And she said, "You remind me so much of her." And then when Paul and I met in person and we walked up to each other, I was like ready to give her a hug. And she went, "You look so much like my Aunt Mickey." So I feel like, and they both said, like, I look like her, I sound like her, I act like her, I have similar characteristics as her. And I think it just helped me get myself a little bit more because I just wasn't really like my mom or my dad or my siblings. And I'm very perky, bubbly person, and they're really not, and it just helped me get myself more. So I would say that going forward, I do feel, that whole spiritual purpose I said I feel like I'm supposed to fulfill. I think Paul is a part of it somehow. So I don't know how, we don't know how, we don't know what at all, but I don't have to worry about that because the universe brings it to us, right?
100%. Michelle, I'd love to hear from you. I've been doing all of the journeying on this episode. Do you have any thoughts on what you're hearing for the first time?
I think that a big part of it is that self-discovery. What you just mentioned, Jackie, is like uncovering parts of yourself, and you can almost feel like you fit in. I think a lot of times, in someone who comes from a family where I feel like I don't fit in, not necessarily from a biological perspective, but simply because we have different priorities, we have different motivations, we have different ways that we want to spend our time. And for me, this past year has been a journey of setting up boundaries, reprioritizing how I want to spend my time, invest my energy, and where my focus is. And so, for a lot of us, whatever form that takes, whether it is human design, whether it is building and making new relationships, whether that is family, biological family that you're discovering, or friendships, or network, or community, or work, professional colleagues, mastermind groups, whatever that looks like, is that you start to kind of uncover these pieces of you and you start to accept these pieces of you or identify these pieces of you or see where you fit into the bigger picture. And I think that then leads to a ripple effect, right? It helps you discover your purpose. It helps you identify the content that you want to create. It helps you establish the programs that you're looking to bring to the world. The more that we uncover the uniqueness of our own identity and how we're showing up, it makes us feel like we have a place. It makes us feel like we have a purpose. It makes us feel like we have intention in the things that we're doing. And then that therefore affects our businesses. It affects our work. It affects how we interact with people on a larger scale. And so that's kind of, what I'm pulling from the story is one, I think exposure to new ideas, new concepts are so incredibly important. And if something is tugging at you, if you're feeling like, I heard about human design. I heard about NLP. I heard about subconscious reprogramming. I've heard about something else that's totally random, the EOS Worldwide Program. There's going to be a little piece of you that feels called to pursue that passion, that interest, that content, that topic, and to follow it and to let that intuition guide you and start to uncover those things because there's a lot of different directions we can go. And as business owners, as content creators, as coaches, we're often being pulled in a lot of different directions, but a lot of them will not feel aligned. And if you're feeling that sense of like, I've been hitting my head against a wall, hitting my head against a wall, hitting my head against a wall, you're probably not paying attention to your intuition. So I think Jackie's story is a really beautiful picture to paint intuition, alignment, paying attention to your passions, your interests, and following them because you never know what doors it's going to open. You never know the opportunities that are going to be on the other side. So that's kind of what I'm extracting from the story. And that I think is a beautiful real life picture of how we can start to do these things. And on a personal level, we know that those impact the way that we work, the way that we show up, the way that we run our businesses. And that is critically important if you are in this place. So letting that personal affect the professional.
I just have to say, if it weren't for this darn podcast, I don't know that it would ever happened. I mean, it's huge. It's a big deal, but I'm really grateful.
I met someone the other day who had a similar experience with a sister actually contacting her. And her response to it was very guarded, suspicious. She basically rejected the whole making that person a part of her life. And as I was sitting there listening to her story, I just felt in my heart, it was like, wow, your closed response to this might really be shooting yourself in the foot. I couldn't imagine responding that way to something this wonderful.
Such a great addition. Thank you. When you're open to ideas and possibilities, it makes a big difference in your life and the things that are going to come your way when you're open to them. So, well, we're really grateful for you for listening to our show, supporting us, bringing Paula here with you today, sharing your story. I know that this story will have a profound impact on the people of the world, listeners of our podcast. And I'm just so glad we had the time to do this today. And speaking to our listeners, I shared this in the beginning, but if you're listening today and you have a story that stemmed from the Her First podcast, if something stuck with you that made a change for your personal life, your professional life, your business, we would love to hear from you. So please reach out to us and we'd love to have you on our show.